Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Open Door, the live webinar show. My name's Ritchie Clapson, and I'm here with the other half of Property CEO, Mr. Ian Child.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all well.
Good stuff, good stuff. Anyway, guys, in case this is your first time, let us tell you what you've let yourself in for this evening. Our aim is to give you 45 minutes of non-stop positivity, and it's all set around the theme of business and property development. Isn't that right, Ian?
Certainly is. Basically, our day job at Property CEO is training people how to become successful small-scale property developers. Because a lot of people obviously look at property development, they often worry, might be risky, might be complicated. So basically, our job is to give them the support and the training that they need to do it as safely and as successfully, obviously, as possible. We also think that with the impending recession, plus the government's new planning changes in the offing, these are all going to create an unprecedented opportunity for smaller developers. So we wanted to help people find out all about it and see if development might be a good fit.
So here we are, guys. Lots going on out there in the world, a bit of a recession, but that's always opportunity for us developers. So now is the time to take advantage of it. So tonight, it's all about your questions. No questions, no show. So you've got to put your questions in the chat box. And by all means, you can submit your questions beforehand to us. We've got a few questions to kick us off in a minute, which is great, which have been submitted this week. So we're very happy to take those. But first, before we start, let's just make sure you can hear and see us. Give us a hands up, give us a wave if you can hear and see both myself and Ian this evening. Yes, you can. Thank you very much. And we've got a good crowd on tonight, as always. So Rob's on, Debs is on, and Rich is on. That's great, terrific. Fiona, Joanne, Andrew's on, Anthony's on, Raj, Gavin, Ranjit Singh, that is, from Property Investor News, by the way. He's on this evening. We're featuring in that very shortly. When's that edition of us coming out, Ranjit? When are we in there? Do you know? You'll probably put that in the chat box and I'll let you know that one. Sammy's on, George is on, Stephen, Helen, Sarah, Dan, Harjinder, Debbie, Adir, Jackie, Adam, Karen, Mike, Colin, Jin, etc., etc. Sorry if I haven't read all of the names out. I do apologise, but we just don't have time. We'd be here all evening if we read out everyone's name. And apparently tomorrow, so tomorrow's edition of Property Investor News will have an article that we've done all about retail properties and where the opportunities are now. Anthony says hi all. Anthony says evening. Gavin says good evening. And Debs and Richard, what do they say? Good evening. I've been doing coursework today. The Debs and Richard are students of ours, so that's why they're doing coursework. And challenged myself to 3 lessons. I did 4, and the mindset 1, 2 with Ian. Thank you. She says, thank you for such a great training program. I would have to go back on some lessons, but that is the beauty of this program. I am loving it, she says. How about that? Well done.
And particularly, I'm glad that she pointed out the mindset ones, actually. So obviously, other parts of the course are available. But always good to get a shout out for good old mindset, such an important part of that.
Yeah, and the mindset ones, to be fair, are all voiced over by Ian, and so they do become pretty boring.
Oh, right.
So, you know, if you want an upbeat module, then listen to one of mine. If you want a downbeat, slightly slower pace, listen to one of Ian's. I'm trying to read at the same time as talk, and I can't do that. Andrew says, good to see you again, team. And yo, A team, good evening, says Raj. Anyway, that's interesting. Shall we crack on with some questions? Clive's just joined us. Karen's just joined us, so good evening. Right, let's kick off. Let's see what we've got in here. So the ones we've had in the week, we had this one in the week. This is from Peter. So Peter, good evening. Are you on? There is a Peter on. I think this is you, Peter. So hopefully this is your question coming up. I've never done development before, but have set up my business and have some good financial backing, and I'm ready to go. Great stuff. What's the best way to approach commercial agents to be taken seriously? Come on, Ian, out the blocks. Do you want to pick Peter's question up?
Commercial agents, Peter, right? Well, very important community to get a good relationship going with. I think there's a few things to point out. First one, which we've mentioned before, is branding. So a lot of people, I think, when they kind of start networking or where they reach out to professionals, whether that's professionals for their team or certainly estate agents, whether that's residential or commercial, they kind of think, well, I am my own brand, so we'll have the conversation, it will go swimmingly, everything will be absolutely fine. But actually, what tends to happen is that they quite often don't have the rest of the brand in place. They don't have a website, they might not even have a business name or business card, and it can all look a little bit like it's just one person operating out of a suitcase. So what we definitely need to have some branding in place. I think the other thing that agents want to hear is about your kind of specialism, about your niche. So rather than let's look at a deal, I'll look at a deal that anything that makes 20% profit, we actually want to be talking about the specific geographic area we're looking in, want to look at the value of the GDV, the scale of what we're looking at, and obviously the type as well. So obviously conversions versus new builds would be two very, very obvious distinctions, but you might even want to go one layer down than that. So you're looking at a particular type of new build or a particular type of conversion. I think you've also got to recognize that commercial agents are quite different to residential agents. It's more of a kind of an office-based environment than a shop-based environment, although of course things have kind of morphed a little in the last few months. But I think when you go out to agents, you want to have a strategy. You want to make sure, first of all, that you've got a list of all the agents that you're going to target. Then you want to book an appointment. So don't just turn up on spec you happen to be in town. Actually make an appointment to go and see them, and have a strategy, because basically the success is all really in the follow-up when it comes to commercial agents. And you'll tend to find that when you engage with them, that you can almost divide them into one of two different camps. One is they'll just stick you on the mailing list, and you sort of leave with the impression that you're just one of many. But there'll be a handful that you feel like you've got a good relationship there, and so you really want to be following up with both. But make a special effort with the ones that you felt there was a connection with, because what you're trying to do at the end of the day is get into that little black book. You want to be the person that gets that phone call when something comes on the market. And we know that agents have told us, commercial agents have told us, I think, Rich, it was like more than half of the sales that go through their books ultimately do not make it as far as the estate agent's window or the property portals. They're all done through the relationships that the agents have with buyers. So you need to become one of those buyers, and the way you do that is brand. Make sure that you're kind of quite specific about what it is that you want, so you get taken seriously, and then have a really good structured system for approaching people and follow it up. That would be my top tips for commercial agents.
There you go, Peter. Top tips. You can't beat that, can you? Good. Karen says hi, guys. Hi, Karen. And Andrew says, just following up on that, he says, to True, I bought my rental direct from the seller. So there we are. It's responding there as well. Good stuff. Right, question in from Liz. So good evening, Liz. Liz submitted this in the week. So another one that we've picked up, and Liz is on tonight. So Liz, good evening to you. Here's your question. I'm thinking of getting into development, but another one wants to get into development, but don't really know what all the professionals do. How would I know who and when to appoint? Okay, Liz, I'll pick that one up. Let me try and answer that one for you. The first thing is, and guys, this goes for anyone out there. If you're going to get into development, don't just give it a go. Now, we're not saying that just because we are a training company, but please don't just give it a go, because you'll fall flat on your face. You really will. If you're lucky, you'll get through it, but you do not want to rely on luck. I mean, development can yield you some really good money, but it's not easy. Okay, development is hard, but yes, you can go out there and earn six-figure sums of money. We talk about small scale development a lot here at propertyCEO. We like to mitigate people's risks, and that is so important. So if you're going to go out there and earn 100, 200, maybe 300,000 a year, don't you think there's going to be the chance that there's going to be some mistakes in that? Because if it was easy, everyone would do it, but they don't. And the problem here then, Liz, and I mean this with all due respect, if you're asking the question, I don't know who to appoint, I don't know what they all do, you need to understand all of that, because you'll get caught out. So for instance, one of the things that we talk about a lot here at propertyCEO is the structure, how you set yourself up. Not only for leverage, we talk about leverage, the ninth wonder of the world is leverage as far as we're concerned here, but it's also about mitigating your risks, and it's getting the thing set up. So one of the things we talk about is you as the CEO, hence the name of the company, or that side, sorry, no, this side, which side is it? It's over there. And the other one is having underneath you a project manager. So important to have a project manager underneath you. And that person then can assist you and start pulling the rest of the team together. But of course, alongside them, having a non-exec. Now, we had a student come to us who made a terrible, terrible mistake and ended up in a position where they didn't have a project manager. They didn't have all of the right professionals in place. They thought they knew. They built a relationship with a contractor. They put a deal together, and then the contractor wrote his own contract, his JCT. It's a joint contracts tribunal. It's a contract in this industry, a standard arrangement. But the contractor wrote his own contract. That's a complete no-no. That really is, it's like an employee writing your own service contract with your employer and suggesting what you're going to get paid and actually suggesting the terms and conditions for you to claim overtime. It wouldn't happen. The employer would give that out. And so they ended up in a position where they really didn't know what they were doing, and they got themselves caught out. There are a good couple of dozen professionals that exist in this industry. There are some key ones, okay? So Liz, some key ones are project manager, cost consultant that could be combined, architect, and structural engineer. Those are your main key consultants that you want to have on board. But around them is a whole host of others. And alongside you, you need to get yourself a non-exec advisor, which will help steer you through this. Now, how you put all that together is so, so important. What I suggest, Liz, there's a great little structure. We show some of that. If you haven't seen it, and this applies to anyone out there, so it's not just exclusive for Liz, although I am talking just to Liz right at this minute, that on our website, go to propertyceo.co.uk, where you register for the webinar. There is a link on there to a video called Why Now. It's on the homepage. And you go through there and we talk a bit about the structure and the setup of a company. We talk about leverage. So Liz, have a look at that. And so then that would give you a bit of a steer. That doesn't, unfortunately, and nor can I tell you right now who you should appoint and when. The bottom line is you need to fully understand that. Get yourself educated. Don't just jump in because you'll make a terrible, terrible mistake. But watch that video, see how you get on. That'll certainly lead you in the right direction. So there you go, Liz. Hopefully that has answered your question.
Fantastic.
Good stuff. Right, what else have we got here? Let's have a look. Okay, Harjinder. Harjinder, good evening, Harjinder. He's popped this in the box this evening. So this is one. Here we go. He says, can you share some examples of where contractors can have one over on inexperienced developers? Well, funny, I think I just shared one. That's topical, but I think Harjinder's question came in before that. But the example I just gave there is where a contractor wrote their own contract, which is just a no-no. You can't be doing that, okay? That's a definite no-no. So you've got to have a project manager who puts that contract in place. The big problem, Harjinder, is when we as developers, or you as developers, so you're the CEOs out there, you're our family of CEOs. So as a CEO, okay, you change your mind. And when you change your mind, that's when they can have you over. That's probably the biggest and the single most important area. So when you issue a set of details and you ask the contractor to price the structure, the refurbishment, the new build, the kitchens, the bathrooms, whatever, all those elements, you're going to specify all of those items. Now, should you then change your mind? So let's just give a simple example that you're going to say, yeah, we want a simple gloss white kitchen, okay, with laminate worktops. But partway through, you decide that no, I've actually spoke to my my residential agent, and I actually don't want a gloss white kitchen. I'd like country cottage with a granite worktop. Now you can have that, but the contractor's priced for one thing. You're tied in with the contractor, so you don't now have the opportunity to go out and negotiate with other kitchen contractors unless you take it out of the contract. And rightly so, the contractor would be due to claim an element of loss of profit. People don't realise that. You can't just take things out. And if you want to put something back in or change it, then you've only got now one contractor to give you a price. You've not got you haven't got any competitive element going on. Now the contractor can't completely fleece you. If you've got a project manager and a QS, they can control that. But to an extent, the contractor doesn't have to give you the best discount. He is not in a competitive tender situation at that point, in which case they can almost, within reason, as I say, charge you what you want. So if you change your mind, that's a big one. And the other big one I give you is if your drawings that you send out are not sufficiently detailed. So the specification on those, which could itself be a written document, plus the drawings themselves, the details on the drawings. Is there sufficient cross sections? Is there sufficient dimensions? Is there sufficient notes? Is all of this information coordinated with the architect, the structural engineer? We're talking about consultants with Liz, maybe a lighting consultant. Those that saw the show on Saturday, we talked to Joe Ballston, an interior designer, now a developer, but she was talking about the importance of interior design. Maybe you've got an interior designer in there as well. Are they all coordinated? Because if they're not, the contractor can have you then. So the quality of the information that you put together to go out to tender is equally important as you changing your mind. So proper control of the contractor, don't change your mind, and have the whole thing properly detailed before you send it out. There you go, Harjinder. That's areas where contractors can have you over.
Fantastic. Well, I think one of the key things to reinforce there, actually, which we've seen a lot, is where people or developers go in and see the end result, well, or the almost end result, where they put the contractors put stuff in, and then because they had a little bit of a lack of vision at the start, a bit of lack of imagination, they now realise that they would have done it slightly differently. So that's when it's too late. That's when it's expensive. And so a little bit of foresight and imagination at the front end can go quite a long way. We've got a question in here from Stephen. He said, now this I think, yeah, we mentioned a little while ago doing a thing called a rooftop survey to find off-market deals. Please, can you explain how to do this? Okay, so obviously one of the things that in fact, the best area to find deals is off-market, because that's where there's a lack of competition. Invariably, you can end up being the only person having a conversation with a vendor on an opportunity, rather than just seeing it on the market the same as everybody else. And we teach a kind of rooftop survey process, which is effectively using our good friend Google, which has kind of revolutionized property development in many respects. And basically what we're doing here is particularly useful for looking at, I guess, two areas. One, fairly obviously, would be things like infill projects, where you're looking at back gardens and so on, where you've got an area of land that has the capacity to and scope to put a property on. But the other one is looking at rooftops. So if we're looking at conversions, where we might be looking for, let's just say, a retail building, a commercial building, a light industrial building that has some scope to be converted, then we're often able to identify these from a rooftop survey using Google. So in other words, we pick an area, a town or part of a town, and we'll kind of ring fence it, and then we will literally go into satellite view, and then quite systematically and with method kind of go scan across the area, looking for buildings that, in the case of conversions, would typically fall into residential areas, or certainly on the cusp of residential areas, obviously, rather than ones in the middle of an industrial estate. And then if we like the look of the roof, then we will simply drop down into good old Street View and see if it kind of ticks some boxes for us in terms of its scope there. And then we literally take a snapshot and then put it in our long list. We simply create a kind of a record of all the ones that we think work in that area, and then we simply follow it up. So we will then, once we've covered an area, we'll then look into each one in a little bit more detail and kind of sift through, just like a funnel really, until we end up with a few that we think, well, yeah, these definitely have some legs for and they're right for conversion if the owner was interested in selling. And then, of course, we then have a kind of a follow-up strategy for getting in touch with the owners, working out who they are, doing some detective work, which is quite interesting. But one of the things that you need to do to be able to work out exactly the best approach with the owner of a building, because it isn't one size fits all. It's not just ping out a standard letter. And then we kind of implement that. That's one of the kind of the strategies that we teach people to do. And it's clearly you've got yourself in a situation where, because properties aren't on the market, then there's less likelihood that the owner would be willing to sell for fairly obvious reasons. But by the same token, particularly with conversions, there is arguably going to be more value that somebody converting a property to residential is going to ascribe to that building than it would be in it as a commercial unit or a retail unit or industrial unit. So quite often you would be able to pay more than a building is worth in its state as an industrial or commercial building, because you're able to convert it, hopefully under permitted development, into a residential unit, something that the owner may simply be unaware of. They will simply be viewing it as it is at the moment. So it is, again, one of the advantages of property development, small scale property development specifically, is that we're not trying to land 200 deals a year. I mean, many developers would be happy with 1 or 2 deals a year. That would be great. Thank you very much. So the fact that these deals are quite hard won really doesn't matter, because each deal can be worth a significant amount of money to you, and it's those hard yards that you put in fact, in trying to find opportunities and progress them. That's the thing that makes it difficult. That's the thing which reduces the number of people that do property development, and that's why there's greater rewards for the people that stick with it. But that's basically, in essence, what the how the kind of rooftop survey thing works, how you find those sort of deals. Hope that helps.
Stephen, hopefully that helps. I was surprised that I thought, how are you going to explain that in a few minutes? Because when we explain that to students, this is hours and hours that we go through this process. So I thought, oh, good luck, Ian. How are you going to do that on a webinar show in a few minutes?
Yeah, so sorry guys if you're on. I took so long the first time, so
no, that was brilliant. That was brilliant. Just a couple of other things as well. Andrew Jameson actually says, I think this is going back to Liz's comment. He said, we're here to help out, but you need a team to help. And I think Andrew, you're a mechanical electrical engineer of some description on there. So I think Andrew's talking about him as a consultant out there of being able to help. Andrew, I don't know if you do development. Put in the chat box. Interested to know whether I am right that you are a mechanical electrical consultant, and whether you do development as well. Interesting to know who is watching. And of course, I glossed over it. I completely forgot one of our guests this evening. He's got a name. He's typed his name in as Sheep Shed Sean. Sheep Shed Sean. Yeah, you heard that right. That's what he's typed in. Most people have put like Raj, Anthony, Helen, Will, Stephen, etc. But this is Bob. Bob is actually one of our students, and he is focusing in on agricultural barns for conversions. And so every show he tries to come up and create himself a name. So we just as well share it with you, because it's mildly amusing, not that funny. We don't want to build Bob up too much. But Sheep Shed Sean, that's difficult to say, is on this evening. Andrew said yes and no. Excellent, Andrew. That's completely answered my question. Yes and no. So he is a mechanical electrical consultant and a developer. Yes and no.
Nailed it. Clear. Excellent. Okay. Got one for you.
Go for it.
It's a tricky one, and I want an exact answer. I want 7. A firm number from you, Clapton.
7.
This is from. Okay, excellent. Answered it before I'd asked it. This is from Will. How often should a developer visit the site during the construction phase?
Right, 7. Right, next question. Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. Who's that from? Sorry.
That's Will.
Will. Well, I like that question. It's an interesting one, because how often should you? How often do you need to? And I think it depends on where you're at. So we talk about leverage, okay, and you being the CEO of a development company and having a project manager underneath you. Now, the project manager's role, should you follow this model, that is what the model we teach, and it's really important. The reason why we teach this is about, as I said earlier when I was talking to Liz, about mitigation of risks and so on and so forth. So we teach this model that you can have the project manager controlling the contractor. Okay, and the contractor then will liaise with the project manager should there be a problem. So if there's a problem with the architecture, there's a dimension missing, or they come across something, maybe it's a refurb or it's a new build, they can't quite build an area, then the contractor can talk to the project manager can pull the architect in, if necessary, get everyone onto site and solve the problem. Okay, so there's design issues and construction issues that are constantly going on. They go on every week. Largely a very competent contractor will sort most things themselves, and if necessary, liaise with the project manager and the design team to do that. Now, unless you're experienced, you shouldn't really be getting involved in that level in trying to answer those questions. And you don't want to, in terms of leverage, to be the go-between. You don't need to be a glorified admin. I'm not saying a project manager is a glorified admin, but that's the role that they will have. And quite often, a lot of the senior project managers will have, less senior people within their businesses that do that coordination. So you don't want to be there with a contractor ringing you at 7 o'clock in the morning. I need an answer on this within 2 hours. You've got to try and get hold of the architect. You've got to sort this, and then you've got to instruct to sort out a lot of paperwork. Project manager, that's what they do every day, and they have systems and processes, the good ones do anyway, to do that. So don't get yourself in that firing line. So you don't need to visit site to solve problems in that respect. Now, there may be a need to visit site should it be an issue which comes back and has to be effectively a client decision. So, let's think of an example. Let's say you've got a refurb and you wanted to move a column. There was a plan that is an existing frame building, and it was all agreed that you were going to move this column to get it out in the middle of the lounge. And when they get to the site, there's actually a problem, and they've uncovered everything, and it's not quite as simple, but you can do it if you want, but it's an extra 10 grand. Now, project manager probably wouldn't make that decision on their own. They're going to call you in, and then you may need to make a client decision. This is one of the skills. We talk about the 4 skills you need to be a developer. So if you're thinking about getting into development, we also talk about that on that Why Now video that I mentioned earlier to Liz. But we talk about, decision-making skills as being one of those, organization, people, and management skills being the others, people being the most important. But decision-making skills, ultimately, you may have to make a decision of whether you're going to spend that money or not. Now, you're going to get advice from your agent and so on, whether that's going to make any difference to the value and so on and so forth. So you might get called to site then, okay? There's obviously another process that goes on where the bank's surveyor, assuming you're doing commercial funding, is going to come down once a month and do an appraisal. And just cutting this conversation short, that's going to be with the project manager and the contractor's surveyor as well, looking at all the costs. Now, they should handle that process perfectly well. Again, you don't want to be a go-between in the middle of all that. But you need to know all this stuff goes on. So what I would say is you want to go to site at least once a month. Even an experienced developer should go to site at least a minimum of once a month and attend a formal meeting. So there should be a project meeting chaired by the project manager. It could be stood up. You could just be stood up on a small site. It could only be half hour, 40 minutes, but it's just an update for everyone. And it's important that you're there as the figurehead. You are the client. People want to see you, okay? If you want people to build for you, you want people to go that extra mile for you, you need to build relationships with people. That's why we talk about one of the key skills is people skills. And so if you're never seen, no one ever knows you, they don't know what you're about. You're just the greedy developer. But actually, if you're human, you can show that human side. And really important, I'd say, is talk to everyone on site. This is a big mistake that a lot of developers make, particularly new developers. They don't talk to everyone. And I mean everyone, the plasterer, electrician, the young lad or girl that's sweeping up. Talk to those people, because whilst you don't know who they are, they know you. Everyone will know because they've all been told clients coming today, tidy up, So just speak to people. It's really important that you do speak to people. And I tell you what, they would go the extra mile to get that quality over the line because they like you. That's tradespeople do it because they love doing quality work. And if they get some sort of relationship with you, then they'll love doing that for you. So once a month minimum, go to site and attend that. And I would say as well, if you're relatively new, it's worth going down when the bank surveyor's there, because these are the people, this is the money line that gets fed through and ultimately pays for everything. And should there be a problem, that's the area you'll have to step in and deal with. So it's worth meeting face to face the bank surveyor, getting a bit of a measure of them. Some of them can be tricky little buggers. Some of them are okay, but getting a measure of them so actually you've got that relationship. So if you have to pick up the phone and have a chat with them, then you can do so because you've met them. So that's probably twice a month. A lot of new developers say, well, I'll tell you what I'd like to do is I'd just like to go down every week because I'd like to just get a feel. I want to get a feel for this new stuff that I'm doing. And that's great. But what I would say, certainly don't go down every day, because you'll have a mistake then that they'll be asking you a question every 5 minutes. And when you do go, don't get dragged in. Just say, I'm just here to walk around. If you've got any questions, fire them back to the project manager. Because one of the important things that we teach on this program, and this is where many, many developers get it wrong, is communication, how you communicate with your contractor. The danger is that you go on site as a new developer, and I think this is obviously a question for Will here. Will, you could go on sorry, the answers for Will. He gave us the question. So if you go onto site and you end up getting asked a question which you sort of flippantly answer, they might take that as an instruction. And of course, then there's no bloomer paperwork. So refer everything back to the project manager and say, I'm just here for a wander around. If you've got a specific question, put it to the project manager. If I need to comment, I will, but he does all the paperwork. So twice a month, really, once a month minimum. Go every week if you want, but don't go any more than that. There you go.
Wow. That was slightly longer than 7, your original answer. But
I know. You sort of jumped around all over the place.
I do think that one of the things that developers get wrong, going back to one of the points that Ritchie made there, was that it can be feel a little bit intimidating for a first-time developer going on site, and they know the people on their professional team. Pretty obviously, they've met them, they've appointed them, and so that feels like a comfortable relationship, even though they're a little bit out of their depth and maybe listening to what's going on. But of course, the people that are actually doing the work on site they don't know, the tradespeople, and sometimes they can feel a little intimidated by the fact that all these lads and lasses working around on site. But that actually, if the developer feels intimidated, that kind of looks at a different way if you're in their shoes. It looks like you're being standoffish. It looks like, what are you too good to talk to us? And you really don't want that. And particularly, as Ritchie said, when it comes to some of the decisions that need to get made by those people on site, because perhaps they encounter a little bit of a bump in the road, they're doing their job and there is something that gets in the way. Well, they've got 2 options. One is whether you just pass it back to somebody. It's cost more money, or I'm just gonna work around it. I'm gonna skirt the issue, or do you know what? The developer's a nice person. I'll go the extra mile. I'll fix it for you. And you won't know the number of little things like that, bumps in the road, that your team on site actually solve for you. But I think if you end up rubbing them up the wrong way, and even just being standoffish and not really just being personable with people, then you run that risk as well. So far better to just be a human being. At the end of the day, everybody on that site, including you, is earning a crust doing what they do. Your role is no different. No, it's different, but it's no better than anybody else's. So be that human on site and engage with people, and I think you'll get a far better result.
And I'll tell you as well, a little tip to add on to that, you'll keep your trousers cleaner. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you a story I learned years ago. When I first got married, I was a trainee structural engineer and moved into our little 2 up, 2 down, my wife and I. And over the road from us was a guy called Dave. And Dave was a bricklayer. Lovely guy, proper salt of the earth fella. He'd moved in as well with his new wife. And I think they had about 7 kids already. But anyway, they moved over the road. And I got chatting to him one day. And he said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a structural engineer. He said, oh, you're one of those suits. I said, what do you mean I'm one of the suits? What do you do? He said, I'm a bricklayer. And he said, oh, we hate suits. He said, you come to site, you don't even talk to us. He said, what we do, he said, if we come, and I said, well, I do, and he said, if you come up the scaffolding and we're laying bricks, he said, as you walk by, if you don't acknowledge us and say hello, on the way back, he said, we'll just off the edge of the trowel, flick a bit of wet mortar down onto the board and it'll splash on you. And we go, oh, sorry, Gov, didn't see you there. And he said, we will do it every time. There you go. If you want to clean suit trousers, acknowledge it. But it's just being human. I just think it's just nice to meet all these people.
There is a follow-up, Rich. There's a follow-up here from Rich, who asks, how many projects would a project manager usually work on at the same time? say again. Don't say 7.
7. No, this is a how long is a piece of string answer, because it depends how big the project manager is, and I don't mean how tall or wide. It's how big the company is. Okay, so if you talk about a project management company, I could give you 2 examples. I could tell you about a project manager that I know that runs an organization, terrific organization, and there's probably 2 people with him. That's it. Okay, so how many could they run? Now that then depends on like the piece of string length, etc., is how many, so how big the projects are, and when are they running, because they're overlap. And so, and then of course, what duties are they doing? So project manager, and again, this is something, guys, you'll understand. Now this is Rich, as in Debs and Rich, yeah. It is.
Yep.
I can see the question. So, Rich, I don't know can't remember where you are on the program, but on the course, we talk about the different procurement routes. You've probably done that. If you haven't, that'll be coming up. And when you see that, you'll see that there's lots of different procurement routes and ways that you can engage with your project manager and indeed your contractor. And there are different service offerings that the project manager can give you. So there's another variable. So they could be doing a real full extent of the service that you don't ever need to go to site. You could, although we ask you not to, you could be running your whole design team. You could run your contractor. Definitely don't do that, otherwise you'll get a sheep's head or horse's head, whatever, in your bed. So because you're gonna lose control of that. So they could be running a number of smaller projects and bigger projects. And then if we take a bigger example of another guy I know, and he runs a firm that's got offices nationally around the country and probably about 200 to 300 people. So how many can he run? So it's very difficult. If you're talking to a senior person, what I would do in the same way I'd vet anyone is ask them what their current workload is, ask what they did last year, how many more projects they're looking for this year, and just try and get a feel for it. But the answer is, I can't give you a direct answer. It's certainly not 7. It's probably quite a lot more than 7 because they're all at different stages. I think you just need to get a feel and just see where they're at. The other big test always on this is if you're engaging with a project manager, starting to have a chat, then just ad hoc, try and ring them a couple of times or ping them an email, see how quick they respond. If it's 3 or 4 days, they got too much work on. If they're straight back at you, then they've probably got some availability. Rich, hopefully that helps.
Fantastic.
Okay, I saw another numbers question here. Where is it? Where is that number one that's coming this evening? And I'm going to do that one quick. Helen said, let's do one more numbers one. How many contractors should you get to price for a project? 7. Devs and Richard said, thank you for your answer. It's a pleasure. More than welcome. Well, actually, funny enough, it could be 7. So in terms of tendering, you want to end up with the minimum of 3 prices. If you don't have 3 prices, you can't compare apples with apples. Okay, even with 3, sometimes it's tricky. But if you only got 2, what are you going to do? One's high, one's low. You don't know which is the right one. Normally with 3, you're going to get some chance of doing it. Ideally 4. Now, really the starting point of that is you probably want to be starting to talk to at least 7. So 7 is a lucky number this evening in this respect, and perhaps even 8. And there is a process you go through. The first thing, you're going to make some inquiries. You're going to check them out. You're going to see if they're interested, because some contractors will say no. Then you're going to send some tender documents, and you're going to confirm whether they're definitely still interested, and some will say no. And so you're going to end up, they're going to be dropping out as they go down the way, Helen. So you want to make sure ultimately that you're really comfortable, and the project manager will assist you in this, even if they're large or tall or short or thin, it doesn't really matter. They will assist you in this process of actually working out that there's ultimately going to be, hopefully, a minimum of 3, absolute minimum, but preferably 4 prices that come back that you can compare. That's really important. So 7 is not a bad number, Helen, as a starting point. Okay.
Fantastic.
Good stuff. Right, we had a question here on branding, which I think was a follow-up. We were talking, the question we got in earlier today about branding. Where was that? I saw one on branding. I think it's a quick one.
So Jackie, I've heard you talk about the importance of having good branding. Why is this? Wow, what a great question that is. I think probably the best way of framing it is, if we think about the people that you need to convince about your role as a property developer, they're all quite important to you. So if we look at things like private investors and commercial lenders, well, these are people that potentially going to lend you hundreds of thousands of pounds. So that relationship is pretty strong. Commercial or residential agents, people that are going to be selling you property or land. And of course, they need to kick your tires, because ultimately they're representing the vendor, and they need to, it's not just about who pays the most money, it's also about whose deal is most likely to go across the line. So if there's a lack of confidence in the developer because their branding is poor, then ultimately it might not be them that gets a deal, even if they might have the best offer financially. So it's certainly going to be important for them and your professional team. You know, these are people, well, that are going to get paid by you. So they're going to want to know that there is some certainty there, that you're on your game, that you know what it is you're looking to achieve, that you're a good business person, that the business plan stacks up, that you've got a kind of some method to your madness, and that your brand is strong. And so we often talk about the fact that, you know, people do kick your tires, and not surprisingly, because of all of the importance of all of those relationships. So what they'll do is they'll have a conversation with you. They might have a telephone call or whatever it is, a meeting, and then yeah, they'll kick your tires. They go onto your website. They might ask around. They want to make sure that all of the other things that support your brand are kind of consistent with the experience that they had in dealing with you and what it is that you say that you're all about and looking to do. And of course, what happens quite simply, and we all can imagine this, is that if something doesn't kind of smell right, or something perhaps doesn't have any substance or enough substance, then people smell a rat. They think it's just, you know, it sounds good, but actually there's nothing there, or I've got some question marks. And with that type of subject matter, quite obviously, you know, people lending you money, people selling you properties, you know, these are things that you don't really want people to have question marks over you. So that's why having your branding and paying attention at the start to set out your stall as a developer is really important. And it isn't about trying to blag it or trying to position yourself as a kind of Uber developer of some description with lots of this track record. It really is as simple as you being an entrepreneur who's putting a team together to do a project, and that is exactly the role that you do. No blagging needed whatsoever, because your team has all the experience. So yeah, that is why branding is so important, Jackie. Hope that helps.
Jackie, good stuff. I'm sure that does. That's a terrific answer. Right, guys, we're very close on time, but I'm going to try and get through some questions here that was put in by Anthony in the week. I know, Anthony, I'd like to answer these for you. I know Anthony can't listen this evening, but he's going to listen to the replay, guys. So all of these shows are up on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Just Google propertyCEO and you can listen to the replays. And I know, Anthony, you will be listening to the replay on this. There's 5 questions here, but I'm going to try and piece them all a bit together and get through them fairly quickly. They're all about developing and holding. So the first question is, if you plan to hold, what are the benefits and disadvantages of keeping all units under one title? I'm going to try and answer these as simple as I can, because we could spend a couple of hours doing all of this. Well, if you have them all under one title, there's less paperwork, Anthony. So very simple. You haven't got to get a solicitor that's got to create lots of leases and leaseholds and split them all up. And also, you know, that is going to be a lot quicker for you to go through that process. Obviously, if you're going to refinance them, you're going to refinance the whole lot. So you've got to be looking at that as one. You've got to be talking to the finances about that. And of course, if you want to split it off later, it does make it a little bit more complicated. So if there's any doubt that you think I might want to sell off one or two, but keep some of the others, then you might want to actually split them as you go through. He says, if you're planning to hold, would you sell or hold onto the freehold? If you're planning to hold, I definitely hold the freehold. The freehold is the strong value. That gives you the ability to do anything. The minute you sell that freehold, you're restricted, and you actually only generally own the internal space of those buildings, okay, under the leaseholds. So the building and the fabric and the loft space and the rest of the land is the freeholders. So should you then wanted to maximize maybe those buildings and extend or do something else with them, Anthony, then you've got to go back to the freeholder and they could charge you. So if you are planning to hold, you definitely want to hold the freehold. Third question, would selling the freehold to a block of flats that you have developed limit your ability to title split and sell individual flats in the future? Yes, 100%. If you sold the freehold off, that's it, that's gone. You're just going to own the individual flats. So the freeholder will want those all split into individual leases. More than likely, there are ground freeholds where someone can just own the ground. So there is a slightly different take on it. But in broad terms, if you're selling the freehold off, again, you're losing control, Anthony. So that means then that you are restricted. You don't want to be in that position if you want this ability to do individual things in the future. The fourth question, and we're cracking through these. Does holding the freehold put you in a stronger position to achieve a higher revaluation when you come to refinance, or would it roughly be the same? No, it would be higher, because the freehold itself has a value. It's a multiplier of the freehold value, and there are lots of limits from the Council for Mortgage Lenders of what you can or can't charge, or advised limits, they're not legal, multiplied by a year on a payback and the number of units. So there is a very definite freehold value in itself. And of course, an investor who wanted to buy the whole block would almost certainly want the freehold as well. So yes, it definitely enhances the value. And the fifth and final question on this run of freehold questions: if you were looking to refinance and hold, would you still analyze the deal with the same criteria, i.e. looking for 20% profit on GDV, which is an absolute must for anyone out there? 20% profit on GDV is what we always strongly recommend. Otherwise, again, you're in trouble. We're going to come around and haunt you for the rest of your life. If you are happy to leave some cash in the deal, or does compromising here limit your exits and increase the risk? The bottom line, Anthony, no, you want 20% in the deal, because two things, okay? One, you need to mitigate your risk. If you start with 20%, doesn't mean to say you're going to end up with that. What if something like, I don't know, Brexit comes along? That could knock you sideways. Or there's that other thing that was going on in the UK back in 2020. I remember COVID-19. That can knock you sideways. So you need 20% in the deal to start with, Anthony. That's really important to mitigate your risks, okay? And also, if you want the funders to come in and support you, they're going to be looking for that as well. They want that 20% coverage. So yes, you want that in there, and you always need, just to finish this off, you need 2 exits on everything you do. So on that basis, you don't want to build something. I hear terms bandied around like, well, we're going to build to rent. Yeah, that's fine, but where's your second exit? You have to have a second exit, because the world changes. I tell you now, you go out and speak to any existing developer out there now, and many developers, I reckon over 50% of developers, whilst COVID-19 was coming into play, if they had stuff on the market, they switched tack, they went for option 2 and refinanced and held rather than sell out. So yes, you always need 2 exits. Anthony, I hope that has very quickly answered your questions. He said many thanks in advance. Well, there we go. Hopefully that's answered it. Guys, wow, I think we're about done.
You need to draw breath. Amazing.
I wanted to get that done for Anthony. So yeah, I wanted to get that sorted. Guys, that's it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this evening's show. Our next show is on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, where we will be privileged to have the wonderful Russell Hartnell Parker from Fox & Sons Auctions on. So we have an auctioneer coming on from Fox & Sons, the national estate agency business, and he will be on to answer your questions. Obviously, no questions, no show. So he'll be here to answer your questions on anything to do with property development and auctions. So look forward to that. Please register for that. If you've got any friends out there, we don't have any, so please do bring them along to the show, invite them to the show. We'd love to grow this community. And of course, please do share us on social media. And if you're interested, business owners, creating wealth through property development is a closed Facebook group that we operate and contribute to. You're more than welcome to join that. Please, as always, post in the chat box if you've enjoyed the show. We'd love just to see it at the end. Hopefully we get some feedback that you guys have enjoyed this evening's show, and it makes it all worth it for us. Debs and Richard said, thank you, guys. Hair is looking good, Ian. Smiley face.
Thank you for noticing. Thank you. I was thinking of going for a Ritchie, but at the last minute, I decided for a slightly different look. We couldn't both have the same sort of trademark hairstyle. So glad you like it. Glad you noticed. Thank you.
Well done, Debs. Debs and Richard said, looking forward to Saturday's show. Already now I have FOMO on the Open Doors show. Fear of missing out, I guess. So much great sharing. Ranjit says, thank you, lovely people. Very impressive, says Anthony. Thanks, says Rob. Thanks, guys, says Anthony. Brilliant as always, says Rob. Guys, thank you very much. See you Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.
Bye.